Welcome, and welcome to the Human Factor, the LinkedIn Live of Inc. and Fast Company. I'm Eric Schurenberg, the CEO of Inc. and Fast Company. Every so often, a company's name becomes shorthand for a standard of business that others aspire to. Today's guest co-founded one such enterprise, a company that inspired 1,000 startups claiming to be the Warby Parker of, well, you fill in the consumer product there. Everyone understands what it means to be a Warby Parker. It means providing a product online at a far greater value than incumbents, and at the same time creating online a retail experience that is as warm and welcoming as you could get on the street. Neil Blumenthal co-founded with David Gilboa the Warby Parker of, well, Warby Parkers. In so doing, he not only disrupted the market for eyeglasses, he expanded the idea of what e-commerce could be. He went on to show how to scale a company without losing its soul. Watching Neil over the years, I've admired him not just as a Fast Company most creative person, which he is, but also as a thinker and a leader of people, the perfect guy with whom to talk about all the human factors. Neil, welcome to the Human Factor.
Thanks, Eric. It's great to be here.
It's great to be talking to you again. You know, one of the things about Warby Parker's history, which is sort of a well-known case study in a number of fields, e-commerce, disruption, and so forth, is that in hindsight, it all looks inevitable. But there must have been a time when you and Dave were starting the company in 2010 in which it was anything but inevitable. And there must have been times when maybe you thought, maybe this isn't going to work after all. Was there such a moment?
Yeah, I always joke around that starting a business is sort of like a roller coaster of emotions, right? There are moments where you think you're the smartest person on the planet, and then there are moments where you think you might be the dumbest person on the planet. And I remember when we had the idea and we're like, hey, we're going to sell glasses online directly to people for a fraction of what they cost. And our friends trying to be supportive were like, that was a good idea. But then you could see in their face that they didn't really believe it. And when we would probe, they'd sort of say, hey, I don't know if I'd really buy glasses online. And those conversations, sure, they were deflating, but then they pushed us back to the drawing board and forced us to come up with the idea of a home try-on program, right? Where we ship people 5 pairs of glasses and they have 5 days to try it on at home before purchasing them. And so whenever somebody would sow doubt in our plan, sure, it didn't feel great, but it forced some reflection that I think made the business stronger in the long term. I also remember a moment where when we launched, we had a bunch of press lined up, and we were pretty fortunate. We were featured in Vogue and GQ, and the company took off like a rocket ship. Which is usually a high-class problem, right? We ended up, hitting our first year sales targets in 3 weeks, sold out of our top 15 styles in 4 weeks, had a waiting list of tens of thousands of people. But that creates its own problem where we didn't have inventory. We were staying up late to respond to customer emails, and customers were angry. So the question is, could we survive through, right, this, major challenge?
That is amazing. That is a high-class problem to have, but still, that's a major problem. You and Dave having to answer angry emails from customers right at the beginning. And of course, the try-at-home program was also really groundbreaking. No one had done that before, and it really required kind of an expansion of what customers would put up with and think was a good experience. And yet that really paid off. In fact, I would say that is part of the magic of Warby Parker's customer experience. When you think about how you build on that, are there some principles that are, your North Star of, extraordinary customer experience that you and the team kind of always refer back to?
Yeah, I think we think a lot about happiness equals reality minus expectations. So back in 2010, right, getting a home try-on, 5 pairs of glasses sent to your home, that was pretty novel, right? So the expectation was pretty low. So the reality of receiving that was, great. And so happiness levels are super high. Fast forward 10 years, right? 10 years ago, we weren't all taking Ubers every single day. We weren't, customers of Amazon Prime. So customer expectations have evolved a lot in 10 years. And we have to make sure that that customer experience is constantly ahead of that expectation for people to be happy. I think we take things like reverse logistics, where right, to set up our home try-on program, not only did we need a distribution center that could ship out 5 pairs of glasses, but we needed one that would receive them, clean them, put them back into inventory, and those were new processes back then. And now we have to do that at scale and much faster than ever before. And then we also have to be thinking about these new mediums. When we launched, we were called the Netflix of eyewear because of the home try-on program. I don't know if those watching today even remember that Netflix, right, used to ship out DVDs to folks, right? And they went through a business model shift to then be streaming. And similarly, we've gone through business model shifts of going from browser-based e-commerce to mobile and app-based e-commerce. We started to open up stores, which wasn't part of the original business plan.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the stores. And in fact, take us back to a year ago, to March 13th. You were, like all of us, faced with the reality that this pandemic thing was not a joke and not a flu, but you're operating in the dark with a whole company of people that you wanted to keep safe. How did that feel, and how did you react?
So those were certainly scary times, and I think they were scary times for everybody in America. When the pandemic was starting, we were looking at it in like November and December primarily as a supply chain risk. And what we mean by that is some of our frames are produced in China and Japan, and acetate and some of our other frames are produced in Italy. And we started to see, right, the virus spreading in those regions, and we started to pull up orders to make sure that we had higher inventory levels in case supply chains were disrupted or transportation slowed. And then it started to become clear that the virus was not going to be contained to Asia or to Europe, and it was really this tsunami, right, that was headed towards the US, and there was no visibility, right, into where this was, how big it was going to be, how widespread it might already be in the US, right? We had no public health surveillance, which was a real failure of leadership. So in the absence of good information, right, leaders need to take a safer, more conservative approach. And on Friday the 13th, a very ominous day, we made the decision to quickly close all of our stores, which was a tough decision because over half of our business was being conducted in those stores. The next question is, okay, well, that's a relatively easy one, right? Because this is about the health and safety of our employees, our customers, and the community at large, right? Because if we can encourage fewer people from interacting, right, there'll be less community spread. Then the next question is, okay, how long are we going to be closed? Is this a week or two? Do you continue to pay employees when they can no longer work? The easy answer to that is yes, absolutely. But then you start to think, okay, I'm responsible for 3,000 people across our stores, across our corporate headquarters, across our manufacturing facilities. I need to protect all of these jobs. Is that possible if I continue to pay folks that aren't able to work? We continued to pay folks for 5 weeks until the CARES Act was passed. And then we did an analysis state by state to look at, hey, if we furloughed some of our employees, would they receive unemployment benefits plus the federal supplement? Would that cover their wages? And what we found is that they would indeed cover those wages. So we decided to furlough some of our team members, but also guarantee, hey, if you're unable to get government assistance, we'll we'll pay you those full wages for the time that you're not working. And we thought that was the right thing to do for our employees.
Oh, that's great. Um, I've seen you in a town hall. You invited me to one at your offices and down on 6th Avenue in the Village. And you're a very accessible CEO. Did you become more so during the pandemic?
So, I think during a crisis, you need to over communicate. And you need to communicate in a way that's clear and concise, and more frequently. So while we had all hands weekly, pre-pandemic, we're actually doing it twice a week now. So Dave and I will record a short video on Tuesdays and on Thursdays and share those out with the team, because there's so much new information. And we're also in an environment where informal channels of communication have been disrupted. And what I mean by that is that our corporate team is not back in the office yet. So all of the informal chats that would happen in the hallways or on the way to the kitchen, right, aren't happening. So we need to come up with other ways to make sure that information is shared and disseminated throughout the company. And that requires some more formal communication like these to all hands.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One of the challenges of leadership stands quite apart from the pandemic, and that is the racial reckoning that the country is going through and has been going through since the death of George Floyd, and has only become, just in recent months, more confronting with the trial of Derek Chauvin and the death of Daunte Wright. How has that changed how you've led, and what have you done to respond to it?
So, right, as a country and as a company, right, we're watching these tragedies unfold every day, and it's traumatic, and it's particularly traumatic for our BIPOC employees. So, as a business, we need to figure out ways to be more supportive, and we need to speak up more to find ways to reduce the number of tragedies that are occurring every single day. And we believe that the way to do that is through increased civic engagement, right? We need to ensure that the right to vote is protected, and that all eligible voters in America have the ability to, practice that God-given right to vote and participate in our democracy. It means looking internally and figuring out, how do we build a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive company? In the weeks following the death of George Floyd, we took a lot of time and looked internally, and we said, hey, what have we been doing, and how do we magnify those efforts? And we published a racial equity strategy. And it's got a bunch of pillars, and it's available on our website, and we've shared it with a bunch of other companies as well to encourage them to follow suit. But it includes making commitments around representation at Warby Parker, but then also looking at the fields that we have direct influence on. So for example, we hire a lot of eye doctors, a lot of optometrists. And if you look at the field of optometry, less than 3% of optometrists in America are Black. We need to change that, right? Those numbers should better reflect the number of Black Americans in America, which is closer to 14 or 15%. So we engaged with some of our partners at these postgraduate programs of optometry and created scholarships for Black students. We worked with folks like the Black Eye Care Perspective to create career fairs at historically Black colleges and universities to raise awareness about the profession of optometry. And these are things that we can do because we work in vision care. And businesses, right, have unique abilities to influence, right, the fields in which they operate.
Let's pivot to talk about you personally and your personal journey as a leader who went in, what has it been, 11 years from just a dozen, you're on your startup team to 3,000 employees now. How did that growth from startup to full-fledged enterprise CEO change you?
Yeah, I think it requires me to be a little more thoughtful before I chat, and perhaps more of my communication now to be a little more formal, because of I'm not always able to have those one-on-one conversations with our team. When I think about the different stages of a startup or a company, right? That first stage, 0 to 25 people, you're often in one room. Everybody knows everybody super well. You often don't even need meetings because you just turn your chairs around, and you often don't even need to communicate the outcomes of those meetings because, people 2 seats away, can hear them. Then you get from 25 to 125 people. Suddenly, maybe you have a weekly all hands meeting. You start to put some slides on the board and on the screen. You now have at least 1, if not 2 layers of hierarchy. And then, you start going north of 125 people. And now you do have really formal organizational structures, a formal people and HR team, right? And these companies evolve. At Warby Parker, we have sort of 3 core functional areas. We have the corporate team, we have our CX team, or our customer experience team, that's primarily interacting with customers on the phone or on live chat or on email. We have our retail team, right, that's operating out of over 130 stores across the country and in Canada. And then our manufacturing team. We have a facility in upstate New York in which we cut lenses, insert them into the frames, and make the glasses that we sell. And each one of those areas of the business, right, have different needs that as a leader I need to serve.
One of the things they say in the military is that an army is only as good as its non-commissioned officers. In a company, that translates to a company is only as good as its mid-level managers. You count on that level of leadership in your company. Like everyone else, how do you maintain the culture at that level of the company? How do you make sure that your mid-level managers are better than managers, but are actually leaders?
So the most important thing is that we live our values and we espouse those values, right? If we're doing that, then hopefully we're attracting talent that already believes in the values that we subscribe to. And if we're attracting that talent, and then through our interview and vetting process, we are indeed, hiring people that are aligned with our values, right? That's half the battle right there, right? Because what is culture? Culture is about shared belief and shared rituals. And right, we want everybody to believe in the values that Warby Parker believes in. Then it's really about some tactical training, right, on how to be a good manager or a good leader, which we can develop, and creating feedback loops to ensure that we're giving and receiving feedback, and that feedback is direct and actionable. And that's been core to our strategy to scale our culture.
What are those shared beliefs and shared rituals?
So one is to inject fun and quirkiness into everything that we do. And I know that sounds very startup and a little fluffy, but at the end of the day, we spend so much time at work. We need to enjoy ourselves. And we think about engagement, sort of the intersection of happiness and productivity. And if you focus too much on productivity, right, maybe you won't have those long tenures. We really want the intersection of both. And we measure that through anonymous surveys at our company. And we benchmark ourselves against other companies in our domains, whether it's the tech sector or the retail sector. And we constantly review the data and we share it with our managers, we're able to maintain anonymity, but still go down to a team of about 5 people. So, right, we're able to pinpoint different areas of the business where we're doing things really well or doing things not so well. Another one of our core values is take the first step. And that's really about being proactive. And part of our interview process is also to look at productivity as an attribute that we want to see in the people that we hire. I think it was Einstein that said, ideas without action is hallucination. And for us, we want our team members to identify problems, come up with solutions, but then take the first step to act on implementing that solution.
There was a time early in the company's history when you evaluated your managers on the happiness of their team. Do you still? And if not, what lessons did you learn from it?
Yeah, I think we've refined sort of happiness to this idea of engagement and the intersection of happiness and productivity. And we absolutely evaluate managers and leaders based on the engagement of their team. And if that leader is not engaging their team, then we need to make changes. Whether that's to the individual in that role or to a process or to org design or what have you.
We talked about your commitment to civic engagement. In particular, you've taken a stance on voting rights, for example, when they're under challenge in places like Georgia, Texas right now. Can I ask you to look more broadly at the arc of your career as a leader? What are you doing now that you never thought that you'd have to do?
Yeah, I think it is sort of speaking up on behalf of the company for the values that we espouse. And I don't think that, I can tell you 10 years ago, I didn't think I would be spending my weekends calling other CEOs and other members of the business community, like business school professors, to sign on to a statement to protect voting rights. But sure enough, right, that's how my weekend was spent this year. I also, the past 2 weeks have also been trying, as we've been meeting with Asian American and Pacific Islander team members to understand their experience given the rise in anti-Asian hate and attacks on the Asian American community. And, I think 10 years ago, I don't know if I would have seen the CEO role, which to be sort of that sounding board and ensuring that they were there for our people. And I think that's critical. And when I talk to CEOs now, right, that's the most important role, right? The role of the leader is to protect the health and safety of their team members. Now, in America, usually business leaders don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about health and safety because it's generally a pretty safe place to live and operate. I think what we found in the pandemic, right, was that the risks shifted pretty dramatically, certainly when it came to, physical health with the spread of coronavirus.
Yeah. One element of Warby Parker's mission from the very beginning has been generosity of spirit, the buy one, give one, that for every pair of glasses you sold, you made sure that a pair of glasses ended up on the face of someone who had very limited access to that necessary benefit. How much of that has been central to the role of the company? And would you say that other companies ought to follow in your footprints, or is it more of a particular thing about the history, your history, and the history of the company?
So absolutely, I think there's 2 reasons why companies should do this, right? One is the right thing to do, and the second, that it makes business sense, right? And that enables companies to recruit and retain talent in a tight labor market. But prior to starting Warby Parker, as you allude to, I ran a nonprofit that trained low-income women in parts of rural India and Bangladesh and parts of sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America to start their own businesses, giving vision tests and providing glasses in their communities. And there I really learned about the power of a pair of glasses to transform someone's life, right? You can't learn, you can't work if you can't see effectively with, and a pair of glasses is a solution for literally 1 billion people around the planet that don't have access to it. So when we were starting Warby Parker, right, we wanted to build something that we were excited to come to work every day. And by committing to provide a pair of glasses for every pair that we sold, we thought that that was a very actionable way that we could have profound impact. And I'm really excited to share that we've now provided 8 million pairs of glasses to people in need around the world. We'll surpass 10 million later this year. And that includes partnering with the nonprofit I used to run, Vision Spring. But that also includes now partnerships, for example, with the city of New York. The New York City school system is the largest in the nation, 1.1 million students. And we have been working on a rollout to ensure that every student has a vision test and an eye exam and a pair of glasses if they indeed need them. And we've expanded that to Baltimore, and we have pilots in Philadelphia and Boston, and we plan to roll out to 10 more cities this year.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that. And while we're on the subject, congratulations, you and Dave are going to receive next month the Helen Keller Visionary Award.
Thank you.
Extremely well earned. On to another topic. Is there a Warby Parker SPAC in your future?
It has been wild to see this sort of SPAC craze. I can't tell you how many calls a day I get from folks that have launched a SPAC, asking if we'll go public through a SPAC. I don't think that's in our future, though.
Let me ask about the Warby Parker business model, which I think now is fairly well understood and often copied. You find a market where the incumbent has stopped innovating and has gotten lazy and leaves a lot of margin for an innovative company to come in and insert themselves in that margin and provide a better customer experience. Since that is not a secret, that's not the whole thing, but it's not a secret anymore, are there any potential markets where future Warby Parkers could arise?
I think there are a bunch. There's certainly a few companies that I'm excited about at the moment. For example, Parade, which sells women's intimates, and that is sort of taking on Victoria's Secret, which I think is a brand, Victoria's Secret, that its values may not align with the current generation. A company like Bloomscape, which sells potted plants and succulents, like direct to consumer. Tend, which is sort of the Warby Parker of dentistry, that has an amazing customer experience. It's similar to the optical world. Dentistry has a net promoter score of 1, right? Really low customer satisfaction. So it doesn't take much to be very disruptive in a category that has bad customer experiences. So for those that are looking to start new businesses, I would recommend, hey, think about frustrations that you have every single day, and start to write those down. And perhaps by the end of the week, you'll have a handful of problems that could be solved by a new business.
Good advice. Neil, who's your hero?
I have a lot of them. I'd probably say first and foremost, my parents, just, some of the most loving and high integrity people. I think about my mom, who was a nurse for over 40 years. And right, that gave me a a very clear perspective, right, of the commitment of frontline healthcare workers, during this past year and the pandemic. And I even, there are very concrete examples throughout my life where, right, my mom was always the first one, if somebody was sick, to go visit them in the hospital or help take care of them. And actually, during a Little League game, when I was about 10 years old, I grew up here in New York City. There was actually a shootout, and a person was shot 3 times. And without hesitation, my mom ran over and helped to stop the bleeding. And my dad then ran out to flag down a New York City bus, because this is the days before cell phones, to call for an ambulance, and an ambulance ended up coming. And these everyday heroes, are the ones that inspire me the most, and thankfully, my parents are 2 of them.
Wow, that's a great story. Let me end on a philosophical question. Most entrepreneurs don't succeed. You're familiar with the stats too of how many companies, by far a vast majority of them, are no longer in business 5 years after they started. And yet Warby Parker is thriving. Why were you one of the lucky ones?
I think we approach this in a way where we try to de-risk every aspect of starting a business, knowing that it probably very well fail. And what I mean by that is, we were in business school when we started writing the business plan. And we actually enrolled in a class where we would get class credit for writing the business plan. So, here there was not an opportunity cost for dedicating the time to come up with a business plan. Then, at every step of the way, we thought, how could we invest as little time and money into this idea before we got more proof points that it would indeed work? And I remember we set up our first bank account at TD Bank, and TD Bank actually gives away free pens. So I wouldn't let us buy pens in the early days to conserve money. So thank you, TD Bank, for helping fund Warby Parker. But right, those are the things. How do you de-risk? And again, not everybody should be in graduate school, starting a business. But I frankly had a job offer that if Warby Parker didn't work out, right, I had lined up another job. So I would just think through, how do you de-risk something? This idea that entrepreneurs have to take these giant leaps of faith and assume a ton of risk that could potentially derail one's life if it doesn't work out, right? I don't think, I think that's a false choice.
Ah, okay, good. Well, that's our words for entrepreneurs to live by, is everything in moderation, including risk.
Absolutely.
Neil Blumenthal, thank you so much for being on The Human Factor. And to the audience, thanks for watching.
Thanks, Eric.